All right, so the first thing, we'll go back to something you just mentioned, but portraiture, if you could look right into my lens, and I'm going to just take some, and not say a word, I'll just take pictures.
Oh, this is getting very, very technical, Mike. I thought we were doing an interview. Now it's becoming like an art thing.
Yeah, well, we always You're in Boogie Nights.
Huh?
You were in Boogie Nights.
Oh, that's because a friend of mine said, would you come over tomorrow like my son and put on a suit and kid around? I said, yeah, he's like a protege of mine anyway. I knew him way before he made films in California. He's a lovely guy. In fact,
he stole my wife.
Which one?
That's right. He's been through a few. Maya Rudolph, I thought.
Is that who you wanted?
She was cute. She was cute. I've never met her.
I have. She's quite a character. They have this little kid.
Right.
Forgot the kid's name. We went to the racetrack out to Belmont, and there was hardly anybody out there, and we just ran around out there, and the kid is beautiful. She's half black and white, and the kid is 1/4, I guess, and like her hair.
Right.
Great.
Yeah. No, I mean, I'm a big Me Group person. So
Yeah, that's it.
Just to be close to that.
That's it.
Would be interesting. All right. Okay. So let's.
What was her question?
My question?
Yeah. Let's get that out of the way first, Mike.
Okay, my question was basically, filmmaking it's definitely beyond a job. It's a career, but would you consider it a lifestyle? Especially in comparison to the era when you were prolifically making films compared to today.
Well, to be basic about it, I knew then, the minute I started fooling around with this stuff, that it was better than working a job. And so therefore it was more interesting than anything else around. So I just started doing it. We basically were just having fun. We weren't trying to make any statements or anything. I mean, a lot of people voted for Jack Kennedy because, back then, because we all said, well, he has a good-looking wife, let's vote for her. Him. There was no other reason. We couldn't tell the difference. We were all too drunk. So anyway, when this film stuff started, we just started having fun. And I was kind of a quasi-writer, so I was written some plays and a couple of books. So we were just having fun, and suddenly there was this underground movement. And a guy on the Village Voice named Jonas Mekas, who you probably know who that is, Mike. He wrote about one of my films, and suddenly people were saying, my God, what are you going to do next? I didn't even know what I did then. Now I got to think of something else. And so I started doing these things, and he was a champion of my stuff, and he was really helpful. And so I started doing that. It's when I had to go into color and use color that I got confused, because I hated it, but yet people were saying, we're not going to give you the money if you don't shoot it in color. So there's only one film I've made in color that I love the color, and that was a film that cried out for it. But the rest of them, I didn't think it was real enough, and it hurt the satire and stuff. The black and white is much more believable. So the thing I'm working on now, although I think Rittenhouse Square is good in color, there's something about the park that's beautiful in color. It has a kind of dreamy thing about it. It would have been all right in black and white too. But the thing I'm working on now, which I mentioned.
Hold on, your microphone is working? You can maybe just pull it down a little bit.
Do this?
Yeah, that'll work.
Is that good?
That'll work.
The thing I'm working on now, which is, Mike might be interested, it's an update of Putney Swope. It's not a sequel. Its first 10 minutes is the same, and the rest of it is not anything like it, and it's a woman who takes over this ad agency, gets voted in. And she doesn't throw out all the white people at all. She keeps the same people who are working in this agency there. There's some blacks there anyway. It is a few years later. And whatever happens, I won't tell you, but it's different. And so I've decided to shoot it in black and white. And I'm not telling anybody. I don't care what they say. I'm just going to start shooting. I don't want to hear about, well, you can't do it if you shoot it in color. Which I hope you edit that out, because I'll never get the money. They see this.
Okay.
But there's one line in the script where somebody says, let's make all our commercials in black and white, and maybe we'll get to the gray area.
It was a theme of the day.
Yeah?
We just left a woman who wrote a book called Truth, and it's about acting. It's about finding the truth in your art, and her art being acting.
So she mentioned the gray area?
Well, no, I think the premise of her book is that there's always a spine of truth there. So if you have black and white, I'm interpreting gray as being where the truth lies.
I think you're right. That's what I'm trying to have fun with. Yeah, exactly.
For you, the truth lies in the gray area.
Yeah.
And it's brought out by drawing out the caricature, or finding the funny moment or the satirical idea.
That's why I like non-actors too, because they don't think about it. They just do it. If you get people off the street to be, and I've done that a lot. I've lucked out and met people who I've used in film after film because they're fun. They don't think about and analyzing. And then I've had actors too who'll just bore you to death with, what does that mean? What does this mean? And it's just so painful. And then you just basically say, you decide what it means. And then forget what it means. And those are the takes that kind of, the minute after you say that, after they've kind of like in a way they weren't thinking, they're more loose.
Well, I guess it sounds like they're asking for license.
Yeah, I could be.
In some way.
I could be.
And you're forcing them to think as opposed to just do what it says. And then once that clicks in from them, then they're able to give you what you want.
Well, to be truthful
Or
about
not
it.
want, maybe.
Well, no, I mean, you half the time or more than that, you don't know what you want. You just know you think is the right actor and the right thing. And the main thing you're trying to do is not do what we're doing here, is have people sit and talk in a movie. It's painful because, when it cuts from you to me, when it's back to you, it's still the same angle. So at least change the camera around and shoot at 6 different angles, the same conversation. So if you have to edit that conversation, the shots are different. Or if you decide to keep them all the same. The idea, I think, is to not repeat a shot if you can help. It's hard to do at times. But
so you never shot coverage per se.
Oh yeah, but
the coverage was bang.
But try to change the angle each time. In some films I don't have time, but I try. If people are going to sit, cover them. And that makes you get them up and moving. I mean, we could have easily done the last 2 minutes walking around.
Oh, yeah.
You and me together, just walking around, and you'd be saying the same things, and so would I, or maybe not. That's what we tried to do in Rittenhouse, was in that park, is to get people moving through the park. And when I was interviewing them, get the camera off me after a while, and just see their face walking through the park, even though I'm with them. And we stuck to that as best we could.
Right.
He's dead, Max.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That didn't make the news.
Yeah, it was front page, Times, Philadelphia Inquirer, and Times too. It was
so 96, 97.
No, he a year ago.
No, I'm saying, how old was he?
Oh, no, see? Let's get to the gray area, 85, I think.
85. Okay. Yeah, it's a shame.
Those other films he's responsible for.
Yeah, he actually sent me Walkabout.
There you go.
And, real nice guy.
Oh, sweetheart.
Real nice guy. I'm sorry to hear that.
He had Parkinson's. 15 years.
He hit it pretty well. I mean, when I saw him with you, he didn't seem
He, two things about him, and I've got to honor him at the festival this year. They're going to, honor him, and Max Reb, and his wife's putting up an award. You should give me your stuff here. It's, I think it's cash for producers, the first producers award. Make sure I have all your info. I'll tell her, maybe we could fix this thing. The election's not fixed, but this could be.
Okay.
But anyway, did you meet her?
Well, everybody was there that night, so I met Max and I knew his assistant, the Asian guy we worked on the Will Smith video together.
Eric Chung.
Eric Chung, yeah. So Eric took care of me in the sense that he wanted a copy of your Q&A.
Oh,
so Max sent me
you mean at the theater that
at
night?
the theater that night.
And you did it?
Well, yeah, it was easy to send
Great.
me a copy. So Eric sent back a copy of Walkabout. So it was nice.
Nice film, huh?
Oh, he has an awesome film.
Have you ladies seen that film? I totally recommend that one.
There's very little dialogue. It's like two kids in the middle of the Australian desert.
Yeah, their father kills himself and they're left alone on the outback. And the rest of the film is what happens to them. And they run into an Aborigine, remember him? In the middle of the outback, and suddenly they can't believe it. He's like the wildest guy, and what happens, I don't want to tell you. But the point I was trying to grasp is that Nicholas Roeg came to Max and said, I have this script, would you read it and would you invest in it? And Max said, sure, let me read it. Let me see if I like it. It was only 30 pages. Wow. And Max said to Roeg, he said, how are you going to make a movie out of this? It's 30 pages, And Roeg said, well, the dialogue will improvise, but that's the story, visually. And Max wrote him a check, and he went to Australia, came back with this great film. I mean, that's who Max was.
Right. Clockwork Orange was his too, right?
Yeah. Yeah, he owned the book.
Unsung Hero. Okay, so
Yeah.
They had to go through it. Yeah, some really groundbreaking stuff.
And he was, and back to what she was asking, he was around during that underground thing.
Okay.
And I had a film called Moment to Moment that was down at the anthology with the films that Scorsese preserved, thank God. Because they were dead. They was ripped up and scratched, and there was no way, no negatives. Anyway, Max saw like 10 minutes of it, and he said, let me get you some money. And I said, you serious? He said, yeah, I have to go to Bermuda and meet a guy named Bip. And I thought, oh, Max is crazier than I thought. And he came back with a nice chunk of money to help finish that film. That's who he was. Amazing. Plus the business thing, the clothes.
Right. So as a clothier, he was on top of it.
Yeah, he was the first guy to do whatever that preppy villager clothing. It was I don't know. But.
All right. Let's find some structure. I'll just pull one out of the hat. I'm looking at the wrong notes. These are the notes
from the other person?
From the meeting. We just
These are notes from the lady, the gray area?
It's filmmaking a lifestyle.
No, I think we got it.
I think we got it.
But I mean, lifestyle, I don't know what that is in terms of...
It's just a piece of paper.
It's always hard to pay the rent when you're trying to pay the rent with what you love. So I've been lucky. I haven't had a real job since 1964, and there have been many years where nothing happens. But has it changed? It used to be that you could have... are we going?
She's just rolling, but
Okay.
not really. I mean, I won't use this part because she's gonna cross.
You can stay here.
Come on,
What's changed basically is back when we were doing these films, people would call up and say, have you got any extra film? Or can I borrow your camera? Or I know somebody who has a Moviola editing machine. You can go in there on Friday night, but you got to be out by Monday morning and leave $50. I mean, this was the kind of way phone would ring, people trying to help each other, didn't care what you were doing. They just knew you from a meeting or something. That's how it was. Nobody had any money, but somehow we figured out, hey, we can make a movie. How do you do it? Well, let's find out. What do you got to lose? And the key was to not have sound. Put the sound in later. We couldn't think that way because the camera was spring wound. You only had 17 seconds to do a take, which disciplined you. And then you go later when you edit the film, you get actors in to put the sound or music or whatever, and that helped. But
these are the earliest films. Still images and
But Fellini had sound, but he had actors just count to 10, and then he put dialogue in later.
So, was that an influence? Were you going to watch the art films?
Well, the Bleecker Street Cinema was really the film school for us because they always had a double bill of great films, and you didn't care which films were playing. You just went and showed up, and so you'd see everything from a Truffaut to a Fellini to Russian films to Swedish films to all the films all over the world, and eventually one of my films, two of them ended up playing there when they stopped being a repertory theater, because there's an interesting thing back to what she asked in an exhibition way. Certain theaters started paying these distributors of these art films more money to not let anybody else have them. So there was no way for the Bleecker Street to keep renting Breathless or whatever because some other theater had it. So then he kind of gave it up, and the last thing they put in there was one of my films with Scorpio Rising, and that became a big deal. That was luck again. The two films together ran for about 10 months. And that's what kind of got me to the point where I could make Putney and Pound and Greasers and Sticks and Bones. Because
so
of...
that being Shaved Elbows?
Yes.
Well, talk a little bit about Shaved Elbows. Like, for people that don't know the plot, how did the movie come about? Briefly.
Well, first of all, I hadn't seen these films in 40 years. So when they did the restoration, I went to the lab, and I was kind of shocked that the guys in the lab, young guys, were laughing at these things in the way they were. I thought, one, they wouldn't be funny, or two, if they were, they'd be looked at as kind of corny. But no, these guys were following all this stuff. And it was refreshing to me. So anyway, Chafed Elbows is about a guy who marries his mother, and they go on welfare and have a child together. That's the premise of that movie, amongst 100 other things. But that was all I had to go on, was I would tell people that was what the film was, basically the story. Okay?
That's the dream-driven fantasy there.
Yeah, exactly. So we raised the money I put an ad in the Village Voice that said, "Walk softly and carry a blank check." And I met a guy at West 4th Street on the subway platform who said, "What's the film about?" And I told him what I just told you. And he said, "Meet me tomorrow right here." And he gave me a check. And think about this. For a film that cost $25,000, he gave me a check for $5,000. And then when the film started having money come in, we would send him the money. And then suddenly the checks would come back. He vanished. And we never knew what happened to him. We could never find him again. It was so strange. But
what do you make of that? Is that like some sort of psychic phenomenon, or just
I don't know
how New York worked at the time?
I don't know. You mean why that happened? Why he showed up?
This angel shows up in the middle of the subway and gives you the money you need.
And then other people put money in because the friend put 1,000 in. So there we were making this film, and you saw the film, the rushes, we took them to the drugstore. because it's mostly stills. So, you know, that was another way to save money. We didn't use film, we used stills, and then put them on film and animated them later, you know.
That was the fun part.
Thanks. Yeah, I enjoyed that.
And, sorry. So the restoration, I mean, you never kept prints of the films yourself?
Well, there were prints around, but, you know, the negatives got lost, the labs went under, nobody kept track of anything like that. We figured once they're dead, they're dead. When they're not showing anymore, why keep them? We didn't think, let's get on to the next one. And now when the anthology suggests doing, showing my films, I said, you can't show those films. They're broken. They're physically broken and destroyed. And then an actor in one of them sent me a film. He called me and said, I have a copy of Babbo 73. And I said, where'd you get that? He said, you gave it to me. I said, I did? He said, yeah, I got it. It's never been screened. So he sent me that, and I called the anthology. I said, I have this one, but you can't project it. It'll fall apart. He said, hang on to it. And then he tracked down Chafed Elbows through broken up prints and would piece them together. That one was shot in 35, the stills. And then No More Excuses, the guy who owned the Bleecker Street had sent me a couple of prints years ago. My wife found them in the closet back here, so those were those three. And then the guy at the anthology found a way to get to this lab, Cineric. And in the meantime, Scorsese had said he would restore these three films. So I kept saying to Andrew, how can he put the money in? He hasn't seen them. What if he sees them? He's going to run. He said, nope, he's doing it. And that's how it happened. It's a miracle.
So, I mean, how does it feel? This year's going to be incredible. You're having your renaissance, and your son's doing really well.
Oh yeah, it's quite, yeah, it's
and
pretty
Rock is winning. And
that's right. Things are okay. Things are okay. Yeah.
You're modest.
That's exactly right. In spite of almost dying in the hospital, it's a renaissance, see?
So.
By the way, what saved me was a Haitian nurse who, when they were saying, what's the matter with him? There's something wrong with him. And she said, look up there. His IV is the wrong IV. And so the doctors ran over. You know, I heard about all this. I was out. And she said, that's the wrong. It came from the pharmacy. It's the wrong thing. You got to take that down. So they took this down and put up this and gave me a shot of insulin and saved me. So this is funny. As I came out of it, I heard my son say to the medical team, everybody's entitled to one mistake. One more and Iron Man will take this fucking hospital down. And that really helped me. Then I knew I was okay because it was absurd.
Yeah, talk about your style and your sense of humor. Like, when I see Greaser's Palace, I think of, my immediate thought is, what if Lenny Bruce made a movie? Because it was so far out.
That's good.
You know, as far as the ride that the Greaser takes. You know?
That's interesting because the reviews of those early films mentioned that this was a filmic Lenny Bruce feeling. The early ones that were restored. I never thought about it. We were basically just having fun.
It was sort of, well, sick and twisted kind of mentality behind it. And going back to the original premise, is sort of like, why, you know, is it the product of the times, or why aren't more people using sort of this low budget technology to do whatever?
Well, that's the great question. That's kind of hooks into what she asked too, but I don't know. I think what you said earlier is correct. It seems that most guys that I run into who are making digital films are just auditioning to get to Hollywood to make that stuff. It's kind of weird. Why? I mean, you have the opportunity with this gear to do whatever you want. What are you waiting for? You know? So maybe it's up to you. You do it. I mean, what do you got to lose? You know, you ask the question.
No, I'm just not trying to step on your words.
No, but seriously, I mean, it's up to guys to. You have thoughts about what you'd like to do. I don't see you censoring yourself. You know, it can be done.
So just trying to put that in an envelope. Tell us a little bit about the New York underground scene. You talked a little bit about the Bleecker Street Cinema and art house vibe. I think pre-VCR, moviegoing was a big habit. I mean, were you in tune with what other filmmakers in New York were doing? Or?
Somewhat. I mean, I found Taylor Mead, who plays the President of the United States in Babbo, in a film called Flower Thief that played at the Charles Theater. Now, the Charles Theater was a place that is on Avenue B and 10th Street. It's a beautiful place, big theater. They would have a film festival, and here's how it worked. You brought a film to the theater and handed it to somebody, and they took it up to the projection booth, and then you could wait for 5 days until it was shown. It might be 3 a.m. That's when you see your film. And it was exciting because people were always there and in and out, and that was a thrill. And then I saw this film, Flower Thief, and I thought, Jesus, that guy's wild, Taylor Mead. And you can't use this because it would be embarrassing to him, but I tell you because it's funny. His parents paid him $500 a month to not come home to Detroit. And when they died, he still got the money.
That's a good way to earn a living.
Yes. Isn't that great?
Why not?
God, and believe me, he didn't want to go home. Anyway.
Yeah. From what I read about this interesting personality.
What a guy.
And then Warhol, was that part of your experience too?
Yeah. In fact, in Chafe Devils, we make kind of fun of when the guy gets painted and signed and hung in a gallery. And we invited him to a screening, and he had a good time with that. He was fine.
Cool. So let's see. You know, I'm getting what I came for and what I'm getting is slightly different. So excuse me, just reprocess.
That's all right. I don't even mind if you ask me one of the questions from the woman who you just. It's fine by me.
All right, let's try that.
Who knows?
Well, what was the question? It's like when you're working with actors for the first time and you're sensing their body movements, is it more intuitive or having seen it hundreds of times?
You mean the same actors do the same thing?
No, she's in the chapter of her book. The book opens with a scene where it's a classroom of actors that are working together for the first time. She asks them to each individually step into a circle and dance to music. And from their body movements, she can see where the blocks are.
Oh, okay. You mean like if there's a psychological block where they can't move a certain part of their body, or?
Yeah, or if the person's very extroverted, but then there's something introverted about them on a different level. She can sense that right away just by seeing how they react.
What is her name?
Susan Batson. She works with Nicole Kidman and Jamie Foxx and Chris Rock. And Tom Cruise. She's helped a lot of people get Oscars. So I think that'll be our next big project. So I'm trying to work that. We're working on that now. But it looks we got some green lights today. So
You're doing okay.
doing the best we can.
Yeah, come on. I mean,
It's been a good year. I think it's in the water. You know, even if you caught me last year, maybe I wouldn't tie that.
it seems like we've been talking 2 years to do this. 3 years.
It has been 2 years, at least. Yeah. Because Putney Swope was not. You did Pound 2 years ago.
No, longer than that, I think. No?
The year before was Putney Swope.
Yeah, well, they're going to show a couple of the restored films this year
Cool. Well, I'll be there.
in Philly, and I'm also going to speak about Max.
Awesome. Yeah.
Yeah. By the way,
On the program.
he was funny. One of the things he said has crept into this new script.
Okay.
A couple of things. One, there was somebody in his organization who really stepped out of line and betrayed an editing thing we were doing, and I actually did something that I thought was offensive. And I lost my temper in the mix and said, you know, you're out of your fucking mind, you know. She was an editor, she tried to cut something out of the film that offended her and thought I wouldn't notice. About 5 seconds. So this might hurt her feelings too, but it'd be funny for you. So about 3 weeks later, I was with Max, and he said, how do you feel? And I said, things are great except for her. And I went on and on about her. And he said, when does the statute of limitations on hate run out? And what a lesson
That's a perfect line.
isn't it?
That's a perfect line.
Oh, God, I immediately went to my notebook and after I answered him and said, I don't know, but I know I'm writing that down.
Is that your creative process other than just doing things for fun, the fun of it? Are you constantly writing? Or
I'm listening to what people say and watching what they do because somewhere it might fit. So you put it in a notebook and to remind you of how great it was. And usually it doesn't fit, but you hang on to them. And then once in a while, when you're desperate, when you're writing, you look in that book and you say, ooh.
Adds up now.
Yeah, that's right.
So Putney Swope, this is, I can't believe without. That's like the anchor for a real black segment. Because a lot of people may have seen it and are going to tune in because they know it, and a lot of people need to see it. How did that come about? Was it the same bagman in the subway? Or?
No.
I do.
Okay, have fun.
I am.
I'm thinking about this. Because of chafed elbows, I had an agent for some reason. And then he called me one day and he said, no, let me go back further. Because of chafed elbows, I was hired by a place that did commercials for ad agencies to become the experimental filmmaker at this place that made commercials. It made no sense. So I took the job. It was money and it was great, and we would make these experimental commercials and the boss would say, that's great. Let's show it to an ad agency and maybe get them to try something, experiment. So I was there a year, and Chafed Elbows was running during that time. And so he brought in a guy named Vorkapich. Do you know who that is? I don't use the internet. My wife does, but maybe you can Google him and find out. He did all the montages in Hollywood. He was from Russia. When you see calendars flipping in a film when the fighter's on the road and it shows this, or a couple meeting and then leading up to getting married in a montage, he did all that stuff. And so he was hired at this company. And none of the directors of commercials would go to his lectures, but I did, and a couple of other guys did, because we were fascinated by this guy. He was about 75 years old. He had a girlfriend about 35, a Chinese girl. He was an interesting character. So one day, he said, I'm going to show you a film that I made years ago and show you how bad it is and show you what I learned from it, and that was great, and this and that and that and this. So suddenly, it was during one of his lectures, a couple of commercial directors showed up because of my enthusiasm, and now they were listening to him and this and that. And then after the meeting, the lecture, it was a black guy. He said, Downey, you and I are doing basically the same thing, and yet you make more money than I do. And I said, well, let's go see Bob, it was the boss, and bring this up. So he comes with me, and we go in there, and I say to Bob Bergman, I said, I forgot his name, Tony. Tony and I do the same job, and yet you're paying me more money. And he said, if I give him a raise, I've got to give you a raise. And then we're right back where we started. And I thought, there is the reason to make a movie about advertising and black and white and this and that. And he did get his raise. Did get a raise. But that's as far as it went. Nobody else did.
Well, the movie is fantastic. I mean, for a lot of reasons it holds up. But the spoofs of the commercials, and that's a really good use of color, by the way, I should tell you.
Well, because it bangs into the black and white, right? Yeah. We knew that the black and white would be fine, but the color would only work if it was surrounded by black and white. By the way, it poses problems because you had to splice those into each print.
Oh, right. Yeah, you can't just print.
No.
It would look blue. Black and white would look blue.
That's it. So anyway, that...
You had Huggy Bear in there.
Oh, damn right. He was in a play on Broadway called The Great White Hope about Jack Johnson. And he played an old guy, even though he was a teenager, with a cane and everything. So I tracked him down, and after the play, he would show up at night when we were shooting and say, what do you want me to do? And I'd say, you got to go after him. And he would invent, I'd give him a couple of lines, and then he would just take off and say, is that good? Yeah, and then he'd leave. In fact, he was in touch a few months ago. You know, his son is a star running back for the Oakland Raiders.
I kind of knew that.
Did you?
I remember hearing that.
Yeah, he's good. On a lousy team, he's good.
Antonio Fargas.
Yeah, Jason Fargas.
Wow.
I think his name is Jason. Anyway, then he was in Pound, and he's a lovely guy. He's funny as hell. And
so, I mean...
anyway, nobody wanted that film.
Okay.
It was done, and I said, what do you mean nobody wants it? All my other films have been shown on Bleecker Street, and they get around a little booking here and there around the country and the college. Why nobody wants this one? This one seems a little better than the other ones. So finally the guy who put up the money said there's one more distributor left, and we're going to screen it for him whenever it was. So we had this screening. And afterwards he comes up to me and he says, I don't get it, but I like it. And I said, oh, great. I couldn't believe it. My heart was pounding. And he said, you know, I own all the theaters. He did. He owned Cinema 1, 2, the Plaza, the Paris, the Beekman, the Sutton, the Fifth Avenue, all these theaters in New York. And he said, I can open this thing in 2 or 3 weeks, and we can go from there. And I said, oh, this is unbelievable. So I'm sitting in his office one day, and he's saying, what theater do you want? You want Cinema 1 or Cinema 2? And I said, well, I don't know. Anything. He said, Cinema 2 would be right. And he brings an ad out from another room. A guy comes in with this ad, and it was this, and it said, up Madison Avenue, Putney Swope. And it was his fist with a finger in the air. And I said, that ad is better than the movie. He said, don't ever say that again. You're going to fuck everything up. And so I didn't say anything. And then that ad was censored and everything. And then they put a girl on instead of the finger on the fist. And what made that film successful was Jane Fonda was on the Johnny Carson show talking about Easy Rider, her brother's film. And then she said, but there's another film that's in New York that you should see. And she mentioned Putney Swope, and the next day there were lines around the corner. That was the goose that goosed the movie into having an audience.
No, I've got a tape where it's like a Mike Douglas show, and you're like there on the chair. I've never seen like your appearance. What's it like, the transition from filmmaker to like celebrity?
Well, I was never a celebrity, but I did get a little play. I was on the Carson show twice myself when he was in New York. And that really helped too, because just when the box office was starting to drop, I ended up on that show, and then it would go up again. So that was it. That was the power of the media, and for a little film.
No film can do that now. Play for 10 weeks or 10 months. I'm sorry.
No.
It's impossible.
Oh, no.
So
Some people would come up to me and say, "Are you the guy that made Putney Swope?" I'll say, "Yeah." I said, "Well, you really changed my life." And my answer is, "I'm sorry. You know, you might have been better off without it." And they look at me like I'm crazy. But to see how people 40 years later, I think the film doesn't hold up. You know, to me, it's like, okay, you know, but I'm pleased that people, and especially young people, tell me their parents made them watch it. As little kids, they made them see it with a tape or take them to a theater. And it's the only film of mine that ever really got distribution. You know, the rest, you know, a week, 2 weeks, no distributor.
So, Greasers.
Yeah, but there's a very funny story, if you want to hear it, about how that got distributed.
Yeah, sure. I mean, how much time? We have like 10 minutes, so we don't.
Yeah.
9 minutes.
All right, so after Putney, and I'm working on Pound, this is about raising money. You sure you haven't heard this?
I'm not sure. I honestly don't. I don't know until you tell me.
This guy in Pound has produced a show on Broadway called No No Nanette. It's a rehab of an old musical or something, a redo. A lot of tap dancing, and it's horrible, you know. And he says she wants to make a film with you. I said, "Are you putting me on?" He said, No. She wants to do it, and I think you should meet with her. So I met with her, and she says, "Well, what do you want to do next?" And I said, "Oh, let me think about that." I had no idea at all what I want to do next. And so I came back to her in a week or so, and I said, "Here's what I want to do. Christ comes back in the middle of a Western with the Father and the Holy Ghost trying to get it right with this guy in a zoot suit costume who thinks he's Jesus, or could be Jesus." She said, "Let's do it." I said, "Oh my God." So I write this script, and I turn it into her, and she says, "I like it, but Sam, who's the millionaire husband, has all the money. He owned Fabergé. I think he was out of it by then. He was really rich. Put a lot of guys through med school. He has to read it, Bob, but we can't do it because he signs the checks." I said, "Okay, let me know what happens." So I get a call. "Sam wants to see you." So I go up there. Sam says, "I read this, Bob. Do you think this is going to make money?" And I said, "Absolutely not, Sam." And he turns to her and said, "He's charming. Let's give him the money." So now, get ready. This turns weird. I'm out in New Mexico making this film, and he shows up with her in a pith helmet, okay, in the middle of nowhere. And he sees Hervé running around with guns on him and everything. And he's looking at her like, and he starts having a little heart problem. So they get him back to Albuquerque and put him on a plane and get him back to New York. And I go to California to edit this thing. And a year or so later, I come back to New York. No distributor wants this one at all, except the same guy who did Putney says, "I like it, but I'm not giving her money for this thing. Let's get her and Sam to open it themselves with their money. And then when the run is over, I'll give you one of my good theaters. When the run is over, I'll distribute it then, but I'm not paying them a penny. I don't like her. She's offensive," and on and on and on. I said, "Well, I don't think she's going to turn that down. You're going to give a theater." So we get this theater, I think it was on 57th Street. It was called The Festival. And the film opens, reviews, some of them love it, some of them hate it, blah, blah, blah. People who used to like my stuff hate this, other ones who hated it love this. And the box office is going up, down, up, down. It's in like its 10th week, okay? This is a thing that you probably can't put on the air, and I don't think you want to.
Well, tell. This might be the whole thing. This might be the whole story right here. Okay.
That's good. You'll need a cutaway then.
Well, I assumed it.
Okay, so
I'm on top of it.
she calls me and says, "I got to talk to you. We got to meet." So I meet with her and she says, Sam's going to stop the money. We're going to have to pull the film out of the theater. And I said, that's all right. I had a good run. She said, I feel terrible about it. You know, I'm sorry, Bob, but we're going to have to stop it all. It's cost a lot of money. And I said, why don't you give Sam a blowjob? And she says, how do you think I raised this money in the first place? Is that one of the greatest stories you've ever heard? Isn't that great? He's about 75. She's about 40. And that's the story, okay? So now they're getting a divorce over the movie, okay? He's pissed off. And she's saying, well, and she didn't like the movie.
And she didn't have a role in the movie. You didn't give her a part.
Well, we threw her in there for one scene. She's hideous. Anyway.
Okay.
So now they're getting a divorce. And she told me this, you know. He's sending out for hookers in the house they were in. And every time he comes down in the morning, there's another piece of furniture missing from the living room from this rich guy. Finally, after months of this, his house is empty. His marriage is over. And she's, you know, happy to be rid of him, you know. But she is a nightmare, this chick. But I thought that's the greatest low-budget raising money result I've ever heard. And I was part of it. I just loved it. I just thought it was the best.
So, just to wind things up. So the Hollywood success, people are obviously treating you like you're a genius at a certain point.
Not really. No, I got offered a couple of Hollywood films that we thought were horrible. And then I ended up doing a few of them in the 90s, and they're horrible. There's only one that's okay.
Oh, Mad Magazine.
Oh, that is one of the worst fucking things in history. I wanted to use 10-year-olds, and they said, no, that's not real. I said, wait, I've been to a military school researching this. They're 10-year-old kids in military school. He said, no, that's not real. Then I went to another one to scout a location, and some kid had burned down the mess hall, you know. And I called, and I said, we've got to have that in the script. And the guy said, you're crazy. That's not real. So I knew I was doomed. And we had these 16-year-old kids. It was horrible.
No artistic control on that.
Nothing. No, I did what I was told and made money, and that's the pain of it all, you know. You find out when you do stuff you don't want to do, and even though you're making money, it's going to turn to mush. You know, because there's somebody saying to you, do it that way or you're fired. You know, it's not like, you know, I know how to make a narrative film.
So these guys who are using their low-budget technology to make Hollywood clones ultimately will find themselves in a very disappointing situation when they're being told what to do.
Or being told either you hire that actor or when you're not getting the money. Yeah, same thing.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I've done it. I've had to use actors I didn't want to use and shit like that because I had to make some money, and you know, and I'm so glad that's over with now. I'm on Social Security. I got a little pension from the Directors Guild. My son is rich, finally.
Good stuff. All right, so just she's got 2 minutes left. Just in honor of Max, just give us a little bit on Rittenhouse Square. We'll try to include that.
Rittenhouse Square, he called me and he said, I helped him on Strut. We organized 100,000 feet of film, and he didn't know what he was funny. I said, I was in the editing room, and I said, that's a great shot. Well, who was the cameraman? The editor said, that was so-and-so. I said, Max, what do you think of that cameraman? He said, I don't know, I never met him. Because I had so many cameras, he doesn't know who. Anyway, he asked me to make this documentary about Rittenhouse Square, and I was sitting in the park. And I said, I don't know anything about Rittenhouse Square. And he said, I think I said it that night in Philly, that's why I want you to do it, because you don't have an opinion. You will discover it. And he was right.
So what did you end up discovering?
The park.
Right. I mean,
what goes on there? I had
you caught everything.
Well, we stayed there a year. I mean, we only shot 20 days, but we did it over a year so we could follow that little girl for a year through the park. She never says a word, you know, the violin player. So it was just great to discover a subject matter in a documentary. Once again, the wisdom of Max Rabb. And then he never questioned once in a while he'd say, maybe I should bring you a character who I know from 40 years ago. And he used to sleep on that bench over there because he lived right on Rittenhouse Square. But other than that, he had fun watching me do what I had to do.
That's great. Well,
Do you know the guys at the festival?
Oh, zero. I'm actually going to be programming the festival. Well, how many days was Putney Swope before this one was out?
How many days what?
To shoot Putney Swope, was it weekends, nights, or?
Oh, no, that was, we actually had a schedule and a location scout and the whole thing. I don't really remember. 5 weeks, 4 weeks.
Okay, that's fine. All right, you may as well cut. All right.
So you're working with the festival?
Yeah, actually, I have a screening series in Philly, and we program African American.